The night sky over Earth burned with falling lights like rivers of fire cutting across the darkness, and people all over the world stood in silence as the strange glow grew brighter, because at first they thought these were meteors or some rare space phenomenon, but the military soon realized the truth when radars screamed warnings that these objects were not natural. They were ships burning as they fell, and when the first wreck crashed into the deserts of Nevada, the ground split apart. With a thunder that echoed across miles, and from the fire crawled creatures unlike anything humanity had seen, tall armored beings with skin like steel and weapons that looked alive, pulsing with strange light. Yet the most shocking part was that these beings were not victorious warriors arriving to conquer Earth. They were broken, running, bleeding, fleeing from something even more terrifying than themselves, and the survivors of those crashes whispered in their guttural, alien language about a shadow that consumed entire worlds and left only silence in its path and among the wreckage. The soldiers found a prisoner, not an ordinary soldier, but a leader. A warlord taller than all the rest, with scars that looked like molten cracks across his body and chains of a material that glowed faintly like it carried the memory of stars. And when they dragged him into the floodlights of the base, lifted his head with slow, heavy pride, even as blood poured down his armor, and he laughed. Hollow laugh that chilled the men around him, and in his deep, broken voice, he said words the translators struggled to decode, and when the meaning came through, the humans fell quiet. He said, "You are not ready, and you will not survive, for they are coming, and there is no wall you can build high enough, no weapon you can make strong enough to stop them." And as the generals looked at each other with disbelief, the alien closed his eyes as if he could already feel the presence of this unknown terror, and far above the Earth telescopes caught movement in the black sea of stars. Something enormous shifting just beyond the edge of sight, and the scientists who watched their screens went pale because the pattern was too large, too deliberate, too unnatural to be a mistake. And though the governments of the world tried to keep the discovery secret, whispers leaked across the internet. People spoke of strange burning trails across the heavens, and of soldiers moving wreckage through the night, and of a giant alien kneeling in chains, speaking of doom to come. And in the hidden chambers of the captured warlords' cell, he began to scream at shadows no one else could see, thrashing against his restraints as if invisible claws tore at his mind. And when the guards demanded to know what he was seeing, he whispered with trembling fear words no one expected from a being so powerful.
"Oh.
They have found me, and they will come for you next." And his voice broke as if the memory of their destruction haunted even him. And in that moment, the humans who stood before him understood that the fall of these invincible creatures was not an accident, and the fire in the skies was only the first chapter of something far darker waiting at the edge of the galaxy. And as the night dragged on, a storm of questions hung heavy in the air. Who were these hunters in the dark? What force could bring down such an advanced and merciless race? And most terrifying of all, what did they want with Earth? For, as the alien warlord sat in silence, chained and broken, yet still radiating the pride of a fallen king, the only sound he made was a low whisper, carried like a warning through the cold air. "They will not stop until the last of you kneels." The alien warlord sat in the heart of a reinforced chamber, buried beneath concrete and steel, while soldiers lined the walls with rifles ready, their fingers twitching at the thought that, even wounded and chained, this creature might still be able to kill them all in an instant. And yet he did not move. He only sat on his knees, towering even in submission, his eyes glowing faintly with a strange fire that unsettled every man who dared look too long. And in the control room above, general scientists and intelligence officers argued over what to do with him. Some said he should be executed before he could summon his people. Others said his knowledge might be the only thing standing between humanity and annihilation, for his words echoed still through their minds. "They are coming, and you will not survive." And when the lights flickered for a brief second during the night shift, one of the guards swore he saw the alien's eyes widen in pure terror, as if he had seen something approach through the void, something humans could not yet sense. And when the translator devices were reactivated, the prisoner at last chose to speak, but not in demands or threats. Instead, he spoke like a prophet of doom. "You do not understand what hunts you. They do not want your planet. They do not want your resources. They want your existence erased. They feed not on metal or flesh, but on the death of civilizations itself." And the translator stuttered at the weight of those words while the generals clenched, their fists refusing to let fear show, though every one of them felt the chill inside their bones. And when a scientist leaned closer, asking why his mighty fleets had fallen so easily, the alien's lips curled into something between a sneer and a broken smile, because he said, "We believed we were gods, and even gods can fall when they face the truth that there is always something greater," in his voice, cracked in a way no one expected from a being who once commanded millions. And as his words spread, the air grew heavy, as if the entire room leaned closer to catch each syllable. And still, they could not understand why a creature who conquered worlds would now be on his knees before humanity, begging not for freedom, but for survival. And later that night, during another interrogation, he suddenly screamed in his own language, his voice echoing so loud the glass walls trembled, and when the machines translated the phrase, it froze the entire chamber, for he was not screaming in anger, he was screaming in fear. "They are here, they are watching, they are near," and his body strained against the glowing chains, as if trying to crawl into the very earth to escape. Unseen eyes, and one of the soldiers panicked, pulling the trigger before his commander stopped him, for they all realized the alien was not trying to trick them. His fear was real, more real than anything else. They had seen from him, and the generals left the chamber in silence, their boots striking the floor like drums of war as the debate grew hotter. Some argued he should be silenced forever to protect Earth from whatever beacon his presence might have become, but others whispered that if he truly knew these enemies and their ways, then killing him would be the same as blinding themselves before walking into the fire. And in the quiet of the night the alien sat, chained his massive head, lowered his breath ragged, like that of a hunted animal, and in a moment when no guards were close enough, he muttered words meant not for anyone, but for himself, words the surveillance microphones caught nonetheless. "You think I am your enemy, but when they come, you will beg me to fight for you." And his chains rattled faintly as he laughed. A laugh not of pride, but of someone broken by the certainty of what lay ahead and outside the chamber. The storm of fear and disbelief spread through every corridor of the base. For no one could shake the feeling that the prisoner was not warning them of the future, but of something already moving silently between the stars, heading straight for Earth. Across the cold silence of space, signals began to appear, strange pulses, like whispers carried across the void, and at first the scientists at Earth's deep space stations thought it was interference from distant stars, but soon the pattern grew. Stronger, too organized, too deliberate, and then the horror of it became clear. It was not random noise, it was movement, the kind of rhythm that only comes when something enormous shifts through the darkness and satellites around. Jupiter picked up, faint shadows passing across the gas. Giant storms, as if something vast and unseen was gliding just beyond human sight. And when the data reached the war room, the generals stared at the screens, their faces drained of color because the numbers suggested ships so large they dwarfed Earth's greatest carriers, and their formation stretched farther than any fleet in human history. And in the isolation chamber, the alien warlord lifted his head with a cruel, weary smile, as if he had been waiting for this moment, his eyes glowing faintly through the glass walls. And when the translators repeated the signals back to him, he whispered like a priest at a funeral, "They are here, the hunters of stars, the end of all voices." And though his words made little sense, the tremor in his voice was undeniable. Even chained and broken, he seemed to shrink in their presence, as if the very thought of them crushed the last fragments of his pride. And when a scientist asked who these predators were, his answer came like thunder. "They are not conquerors, they are not invaders, they are erasers. They do not leave history behind, only ashes. They destroyed my empire, and they will consume you too, because this is their way, this is their hunger." And the humans exchanged glances heavy with disbelief. Yet none could deny the fear clawing at their chests, for the screens did not lie. The shadows in space were closing in, and still they could not tell how many or how strong, only that the distance Between Earth and the unknown grew smaller with every passing hour, and deep in the Pentagon voices rose in argument. Some demanded to unleash nuclear fire into the void to strike before the enemy came too near, but others warned that such a gesture would be as useless as throwing stones at a storm, and in the confusion someone asked the question no one wanted to speak aloud. Should we free the alien warlord and beg his help for, if his words were true, he had faced these hunters before even. If he had failed, and though many scoffed at the thought of trusting an enemy, a chilling silence settled over them. And the alien pressed his clawed hands to the glass and said, "You cannot fight them alone, you are fragile. You're small, but if you follow me, if you obey me, I can make you into something sharper, something that can cut back against the dark," and his chains rattled as if mocking his plea. Yet his eyes burned with something desperate, not pride, not power, but survival, and the scientists noted his words carefully because hidden in his fear was knowledge. The kind of knowledge humanity had never possessed about enemies, who moved like ghosts between the stars, and as if to confirm his warnings, Earth's telescopes picked up anew. Sight a black shape eclipsing the distant sun for a moment, a ship so large it blocked light, like a moon drifting across the heavens, and when that image flashed across the monitors, the room filled with gasps, because it was not one ship but dozens, layered upon each other like living mountains, moving in silence, the kind of silence that kills hope, and one young officer muttered under his breath, "If they reach orbit, we are finished," and the alien warlord smiled bitterly for the first time, not with arrogance but with the truth. "You are already finished," and yet something stirred in the eyes of the generals, something that made the alien pause. It was not surrender, it was not despair, it was the look of a species that had always been underestimated. And as alarms began to wail through the base, humanity prepared not to bow, not to beg, but to fight, even if the darkness they faced was older and stronger than anything that had come before. The halls of command were heavy with tension as generals pounded the table, their voices sharp with fear and defiance because the truth could no longer be hidden. The fleet of shadows was real, and it was coming closer every hour, and yet the greatest argument was not about weapons or battle plans. It was about the chained warlord sitting in the reinforced chamber below. Should humanity keep him imprisoned? Should they execute him before he betrayed them? Or should they risk the unthinkable and let him lead them against the nightmare that hunted? The stars in the debate stretched deep into the night. Some argued that his words were poison, that trusting him was suicide, but others remembered the way his body trembled when he spoke of the predators that had erased his empire, the way his voice cracked, not in performance but in terror. And finally, the president spoke across the secure channel, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of every life on Earth. "If there is even a chance he can help us survive, we cannot ignore it." And with that order, the chamber doors opened again, and soldiers entered to find the alien kneeling, his massive body still bound, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. And when the translator was activated, he did not laugh this time. He did not sneer. He spoke with a grave patience. "You cannot win without me. You think your ships, your weapons, your courage will save you, but they will fall as mine fell. And yet, if you give me command, if you follow my hand, I can shape you into something that will cut deep enough to wound them." And when a general spat in disgust, calling him a liar, the warlord lowered his head further, his pride swallowing itself, and said, "Then kill me now if you must. But know that when their shadows cover your sky, you will remember my words, and you will curse yourselves for silencing the only voice that knew how to fight them." And in the silence that followed, no one dared to pull the trigger, for beyond the walls of the chamber, alarms were beginning to sound. Again, this time not drills, not tests, but real movement near Jupiter, where human fleets had been stationed as guardians of the outer system, and the first reports crackled in over the radios. Heavy and broken by static enemy contact, massive losses. "The line is breaking," and within minutes, the live feed confirmed it. A human armada, reduced to wreckage in the blink of an eye. Ships torn apart by beams of dark energy that cut through metal like paper, the survivors screaming as their signals went dead, and the room filled with silence so thick it felt like a tomb. And the alien lifted his head slowly, his chains rattling softly as he spoke. You see, now your courage is strong, but courage alone cannot stop what comes. And though the generals raged, though the soldiers clenched their fists in fury, a seed of truth had been planted inside them, because the feed showed reality raw and merciless. Their fleets could not stand alone, and so at last the decision was made not to free him entirely, but to unbind him enough to share his knowledge. And when the shackles loosened, his first action was not to rise in pride, but to sink lower his knee. Pressed hard against the steel floor, his massive form bowing in a gesture that silenced the entire chamber, and in a voice that carried both humiliation and survival, he said, "Then I kneel before humanity. I will fight as your servant, if it means life over death, but my guidance must be followed without question." And though the humans did not trust him, though doubt burned bright in their eyes the truth of the battle above, Jupiter left them no other choice, and orders were given for their fleets to regroup, not under the sole command of Earth, not under the sole command of the alien, but under a fragile alliance forged in the fire of necessity. And as the warlord rose to his feet for the first time, as his capture, his shadow stretched long across the walls, and in that moment everyone in the chamber felt the weight of the choice they had made. For they had not only unbound a prisoner, they had unleashed something that had once conquered galaxies, and now it would fight. Not against them, but beside them, and outside in the vastness of space, the enemy scouts tightened their grip on the solar system, drawing closer every second like wolves closing around a cornered prey, and humanity braced itself for a war that would decide not only Earth's fate, but the very meaning of survival against the dark. The sky above Earth burned with fire as the first true battle began. Ships rose from the oceans from hidden hangars carved into mountains from launch pads that trembled under the roar of engines. Humanity had thrown everything into the void, every fighter, every missile, every beam of light they could muster, and at the center of this desperate storm, the alien warlord stood upon the command deck of a human flagship, his armor repaired just enough to function, his massive frame towering over the smaller human officers. And though his chains were gone, a dozen rifles never left his back, yet he did not strike. He did not mock. Instead, he moved with cold precision, his clawed hand pointing to the holoscreens. His fleets formed into shapes humanity had never attempted before, weaving patterns that seemed reckless to the generals, but deadly sharp once they unfolded against the dark hunters who descended upon them. Like shadows given form, and the first clash came swift, the alien armada, striking with weapons that bent space itself, shredding human cruisers into sparks. Yet for the first time, humanity did not break. They moved as the warlord commanded, their smaller, faster ships darting between enemy fire, drawing the predators into narrow lines where Earth's heavy cannons unleashed fury and the heavens erupted with explosions. Brighter than cities burning, and still the warlord barked orders in his guttural tongue, the translator racing to keep up while human commanders relayed his words. And though suspicion remained, though hatred burned hot in their hearts, they could not deny that his tactics saved them. Again and again, ships that should have been lost survive because of maneuvers too alien, too ruthless for human minds alone to imagine. And yet even as they fought, the warlord found himself staring at the faces of his human allies. The way pilots screamed defiance as they plunged their fighters headlong into impossible odds, the way soldiers on the ground fought with rifles against towering enemy machines, refusing to flee even when death was certain, and something inside him twisted, for in all his long years of war across countless worlds he had never seen such stubborn fire aflame that refused to die, no matter how hopeless the battle. And when one human fleet was nearly annihilated by a sudden ambush, a captain ordered her ship to ram the enemy cruiser rather than retreat, her voice steady as she cried for Earth. In the explosion lit the void like a newborn star, scattering the predators long enough for reinforcements to strike, and the alien warlord fell silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the bravery that cost her life, his chest heavy with an unfamiliar weight. And still the battle raged, Earth's orbit shaking as energy blasts tore through the upper atmosphere, skyscrapers trembling as the ground forces joined the fight, alien walkers storming the cities only to be met by tanks and drones and civilians who refused to surrender. And in the chaos, the warlord fought side by side with human soldiers, His massive frame tearing through the enemy with blades of burning light, and for every enemy he cut down, he saw humans do the same with nothing but grit and courage, and in his mind, the unshakable truth grew clearer. These humans were not weak, not fragile, not prey. They were something far more dangerous than any species he had ever known, and when the largest predator ship descended over Earth, a vessel so vast it blotted out the sun, the warlord urged. Retreat, but the humans refused, their generals roaring across the combs. We do not run. We fight here and now, and against every calculation, against every logical strategy humanity unleashed. Its final gamble, every ship, every missile, every blade, turned against that monstrous shadow, and in the impossible firestorm that followed the impossible happened, the beast fell torn apart, not by superior weapons, not by godlike power, but by sheer will and sacrifice, and as the wreckage burned in the upper sky, the warlord stood among the surviving humans. His body scarred, his armor shattered, his eyes wide. With a fear he had never known, not fear of the hunters, not fear of death, but fear of what humanity truly was. For in that moment, he understood something terrible. They were not just survivors. They were defiant, they were unyielding, they were a force that could never be broken, and in his heart, the thought whispered like thunder, if they could destroy this, what else could they become? And for the first time in his long and merciless life, the warlord began to fear not his enemies, but his allies. The battlefield was quiet at last, though the quiet was not peace, but the heavy silence that follows when the sky itself has been torn apart. The wreckage of ships, both human and alien, drifted in orbit, glowing like dying stars while smoke and fire curled across Earth's atmosphere, and beneath the broken sky, survivors stumbled from bunkers, from shattered cities, from burning ships, their faces blackened by ash, but their eyes unbroken, and on the command deck of what remained of Earth's fleet, the alien warlord stood motionless, his massive body slumped, as if the weight of what he had seen pressed down harder than the chains that once bound him. For the hunters who had erased his empire were gone, their great mothership torn apart by the fury of a species he once thought too fragile to stand against even the smallest threat. And now, as he looked at the soldiers around him, bloodied, exhausted, yet still standing, he realized the truth that terrified him more than death itself. These humans could not be conquered. They could only rise stronger with every wound they suffered. And when the battle finally ended, when the last flames dimmed, he was brought once more to the ground on Earth, surrounded by armed guards and commanders. His armor shattered, his weapons lost, and though no chains held him this time, he felt weaker than he had ever felt before, because in the eyes of the humans he saw not fear, but something colder, something that told him his place in this galaxy had changed forever. And so, at last, the moment came. The warlord, who once commanded millions, the warlord who had made planets bow and civilizations burn, lowered himself to his knees before humanity. His massive form leaned, trembling not from wounds, but from the weight of defeat, and his voice broke as he spoke the words no one imagined they would hear from a creature so proud. Please do not kill me. And the translators carried his plea across the silent field, and soldiers who had lost friends, who had watched their world nearly burn, gripped their rifles tighter, their breaths sharp with the desire for vengeance. But the generals raised their hands and ordered them to wait, for there was something greater in this moment than revenge. There was a choice that would echo through the galaxy, and as the warlord knelt shamed and broken, he confessed what lay in his heart. I once thought you were weak. I once thought you would kneel before me as so many others have. But I was blind, for you are not prey. You are not fragile. You are the most dangerous species I have ever known. For you do not bow, you do not surrender, and when you fight until the stars themselves fall silent. And his words cracked like thunder across the ruins, leaving every human who heard them with a fire burning brighter in their chest. For they had not only survived, they had made even their enemy kneel, and yet humanity did not strike him down. Instead, the leading general stepped forward, his boots heavy against the rubble, and his voice steady with the weight of the decision. We will not kill. You will go back to the stars. You will tell the galaxy what you have seen. Tell them. Earth is not afraid. Tell them humanity will never kneel." And the warlord lifted his head, his eyes wide with disbelief, because in sparing him they had shown something even more terrifying than their strength. They had shown mercy, a mercy sharper than any blade, and as he rose his body, still trembling, he whispered words that carried like a shadow across the battlefield. "The galaxy will tremble when it hears your name." And with that, he was led away, no longer a conqueror, no longer a king, but a messenger, carrying the story of a world that had faced the hunters of civilizations and survived. As the smoke cleared from the skies and the people of Earth lifted their eyes to the stars, they knew the war was not over. They knew more battles would come, but they also knew something no power in the galaxy could take from them. They had made the invincible fall. They had made the proud kneel. And now the universe would learn the truth that humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm that even the darkest night could not silence.